Hey everybody, today we are going to talk about finishing powders versus setting powders. This was a question that I got asked, and it was one of those that when I got asked, I was like, one of those things that I feel like I understand, but I didn't know the best way to describe it. And so I kind of did some digging, and I found a comment in a Facebook pro makeup group that I thought summed it up so well. And so I want to read that to you first because I feel like this is the simplest way to put it. And then, you know me, I'm going to complicate it and we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. So I want to read this comment first. And this is by a lady named Devisha. And she said, setting powders are typically absorbent and set the makeup underneath them, whether they provide coverage or not. Finishing powders are more about texture and light diffusion than oil absorption, coverage, or staying power. And then she goes to put setting equals sets the makeup, finishing equals provides a specific finish. And I thought that was the best way to put it. And I think that a lot of times, and I've got some examples here, products can be mislabeled. And I also think this applies to sprays as well. Just because something's a makeup spray does not mean that it is a finishing spray or a setting spray. I'm sorry, it could be a finishing spray. Like Max Fix Plus is extremely popular. It's not a setting spray. It's not intended to set and prolong your makeup wear. It's simply to provide a finish. Now, with both sprays and powders, you can also have hybrid products. They can do both. That is a thing. So just keep that in mind. And I wanted to talk about this since it was a specific question. Wrigley, all the dogs are just all around. But it's not, I don't think you have to put too much thought into this. Okay, but so yeah, I don't want you guys to think too much about that. It's just, I don't think setting versus finishing, use the powder the way it works for you, and don't necessarily even rely with what it says on the outside of the container, because I don't even find that to be 100%. So let me just go through some of these powders, and we're going to talk about how they're labeled, but what I think they're actually used for. And I pulled out quite a few, but I didn't pull out every powder. Okay, so this is the Cover FX Perfect Setting Powder. And there's not very much in there. I do really like this. This is a great setting powder, you guys, especially for under the eye. They came out, I think, with a matte and then an illuminating. And yeah, so here's the illuminating center. They had a matte and illuminating. And everybody was like, we need a mix. So then they came out with this one and just called it Perfect. And it definitely, the others were not that great for setting powders, but this one really is great because it just kind of doesn't really change anything, right? So there is the Perfect Setting Powder by Cover FX. Now, this is their illuminating setting powder. So this is maybe a hybrid. I would definitely qualify it as a finishing powder, not a setting powder, but it may have some oil absorbing properties, which could qualify it as a hybrid. So now we still have this powder here, the setting powder, and then this is the illuminating finishing powder. And we'll see if I can knock some of this down. So it's not going to show up as well on screen, but see how the other one kind of disappeared into my skin? And then this one is very light reflecting, you can see the sheen. So it's giving us an additional finish. So, and yes, it could probably absorb oils and help set the makeup as well, but you are getting a different finish out of this. So I would call this a finishing powder or a hybrid, where this to me is a true setting powder. It didn't change the finish of my skin at all. So that's why I just think that labels can be kind of deceiving, I guess. So yeah, so then we have, so I literally just went through my drawer, you guys, and was like trying to find anything that either said the word setting powder or finishing powder, because I was just really curious about how they were being labeled. This is available at Walmart. This is the Found Translucent Loose Setting Powder. I think this is probably the best cruelty-free drugstore under eye setting powder that is currently on the market. And I think this one has, it is a setting powder. I think it's borderline on having a bit of a hybrid to a finishing powder, because you can see that it's got a little bit of light reflection in it. Not as much as the illuminating Cover FX powder, but there is some finishing aspects to this. The Born This Way Ethereal Setting Powder by Too Faced. Let me hold this up right for you guys. I would qualify this one probably as a setting powder. There's not a lot of shimmer to it. There's a whole powder cloud coming around. This is going to be such a messy video. Look at my hand just from opening that jar. Okay. Then this, I don't know, this one's on the fence for me. So what I want to say is these powders that are finishing or setting really shouldn't be able to be qualified as a powder foundation. In theory, a highlighter is a finishing powder, in theory. But they're in their own category. Bronzer, blush, all that, that's a different category. This is the Huda Beauty Easy Bake Loose Baking and Setting Powder. I would say this is borderline on being a setting powder because this has a fair amount of color to it. But she is saying that it's a baking and setting powder. I do really like this, by the way, you guys. But this comes in a range of colors, which is always good. So, but it's not a translucent powder. Okay, so those are the ones that I had that are specifically labeled that they are setting powders. Now, these are the ones that are labeled as finishing powders. My favorite, the NYX No Filter, and it says right on there, finishing powder. And I absolutely believe this. This is because I've told you guys, like, it gives my skin a luminosity as well as, and I would say this is a hybrid because this does set, but it gives the skin a bit of a sheen. It gives the skin a finish. So that is why this is more than just a setting powder. It is a finish powder because it's adding a glow to your skin. If you've ever enjoyed MAC Mineralized Skin Finish, this is a good dupe. I believe that's what it's called. It's been so long since I've used that powder. MAC Mineralized Skin Finish. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Oh, and just so, this comes in lots of colors. This is Medium Olive 07. This is the Juice Beauty Flawless Finishing Powder. This, I think I disagree with. Well, okay, maybe there's a little bit. I would call this one more of a setting powder. I think it's supposed to have a bit of a luminosity to it, but it just doesn't really show up all that well in my opinion. So if I were labeling this product, I would have labeled it a setting powder, not a finishing powder. You guys, this is a giant mess. You should see the front of my, like the bottom front of my shirt and my pants and the table in front of me. It is a mess. I've got a brush out now. We're using a brush to sweep. Okay. This is the Maybelline Fit Me Loose Finishing Powder. Not cruelty-free, by the way. This is another one I think I would have labeled a setting powder. I don't think you get a finish out of this. It doesn't make it more matte. It doesn't make it more luminous. What does it say it's supposed to do? Mineralized-based formula helps control shine and smooth skin's texture, lightweight, translucent coverage, fresh, natural look, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I think this one's mislabeled. I would have labeled this a setting powder. Maybe just it says helps control shine. So maybe it has a slight mattifying property, and that's why they're labeling it as a finish powder. But I don't find it a very strong mattifying property, so I would have labeled this a setting powder. Okay, and then this one I went ahead and pulled out. This is the Chanel Poudre Libre Universal, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, the English is Natural Finish Loose Powder. So it didn't say finishing, but it said natural finish. And this, I never use this, you guys. This I would say is, I understand why they labeled it a finishing powder, because it does have a micro sheen to it. But again, I don't think it's that much, and I would qualify this more as a loose setting powder. So everything we've talked about today so far, you guys, is loose except for this one. And I don't want you to think that finishing or setting powders have to be loose. They don't. I just tend to buy more loose powders than I do pressed powders. I personally find them easier to work with. So that's why we have so many. Now we're going to get into some more. I just dropped it on Remy's head. Okay. Here's where we're going to get into some pressed powders. This video is a hot mess today. Okay, this is the Midnight Reflection Illuminizing Powder by Honest Beauty. I'm taking a drink of Diet Coke. This I would label as a finishing powder. This gives a sheen, and it's like just under a highlighter. Like, if you wanted an extremely, extremely, extremely natural highlighter, you might want to pick up one of these Honest Beauty powders. I think they come in a couple different colors. I bought this because I think this is a really great dupe for MAC Emphasize, but it's cruelty-free. So I really like this powder. I would label this a finishing powder, but it doesn't specifically say that on the packaging. I don't use this to highlight. I use it to the under eye and down the center of the face to just create more of a glow. If you're oily and you worry about blotting all the time, that would not be a good use of that powder for you. This powder is very similar. This is the Urban Decay, the Illuminizer Translucent Pressed Beauty Powder. I believe this would be a hybrid, but definitely on the finishing powder side because there is a strong illumination to this. I put it down the center there. I don't know if you can see. Most of these are like translucent, you guys, so they're not going to show up a ton on my skin. That's why I'm trying to catch some light here. Then the probably most popular finishing powder of all time are the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Powders. This is Ethereal Light, which is like a very almost white color. These are so beautiful. I don't know why I'm I'm over here memorized, like swatching them without showing you guys. So you can see the sheen that creates. And that one is white. I also have, that's why you're able to see it a little more. They also have this one. This is Diffused Light. This is more yellow. You can see I have more than hit pan on that. So, and I thought when Hourglass came out with these, they did a really great job of giving them descriptions, and you may still be able to find those on their website. They say, like, I forget now the exact, I'm going to make this up, diffused light. It's like, it's supposed to, represent the light of a candle. Like if you were candlelit, this is the glow you would get if you were surrounded by candles. And then I think like ethereal light was like, this is the glow you would get under moonlight. So then they have some that are more rosy tone and whatever. And so they really have great descriptions, I think, of kind of telling you the effect you're supposed to get from it, which I think is really great. They're all obviously very luminizing, and they come in different tones so that you can, you know, give your face a tone if you want to give it a rosier tone, which doesn't go well for me because I have such yellow skin tones. It just looks like I couldn't match my foundation. So that's why I stick to these two, because it's like a white. This one's really great for under the eyes, and the yellow one as well. You can set your whole face with them, but just know you're going to be glowy. I've done it. I personally like the way it looks because I have dry skin, but you are very glowy. And then the last one, this thing's insane. This is finishing powder on crack. This is the Lancome Absolute Powder, and it's called a Radiant Smoothing Powder, and this is the color Absolute Petch. This is the label, and this is what it looks like. This is borderline a highlighter. You need to be very careful when you use this on your face because you can look like a disco ball really quickly. Like in this lighting, it won't be that bad. And then you'll go out in the sun and you'll look like a glitter bomb. So it's beautiful. I love this powder, especially under the eyes, because I'm always wanting light there since I'm so dark. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous powder, especially if you did like a really light dusting. If you want this powder, it's not cheap. But I have seen Macy's have a really good sale on it, like a really, really good sale. One time I had just bought this one, and like a month later, Macy's had it on a really good sale, and I was like, dang, I should go buy another one, because it was like, I think it was like half off. And I was like, no, that's stupid. You have a giant, what is this, 10-gram container of it, and you don't use that much. But this, if you do a really light dusting, is great. I will say that with all of the finishing powders, you guys. Be careful with them, because especially the ones that are adding luminosity, those, if you get too heavy-handed, you're going to look funny. So the other type, I know I've showed you all luminous finishing powders. That's because I don't own matte finish powders. I have extremely dry skin because I have a Retin-A prescription, which we've talked about before. And I'm never trying to mattify my face. That's not something I go for, but a mattifying powder would be a finishing powder. And most of the time, if it's mattifying, it's oil absorbing, which is going to naturally have setting properties. So most mattifying finishing powders are going to be setting powders as well. I think even with all this drama, that's all that I have to say about finishing and setting powders. So I'm just going to read the rest, an additional comment that the same lady made. So now that this comment's basically identical to her first comment, but now that we've talked about it, I want to summarize it with another one of her comments. And she said, finishing powder is a textural thing. It's not necessarily going to keep the makeup on. It may impart a dewy finish, a natural satin, velvet, or a matte finish. It won't necessarily be absorbent. It may offer diffusion or optical effects. Setting powder is to absorb and keep what's there. It's probably going to be powdery in nature. And then it says also that, you know, like based on different ingredients and stuff like that, which we're not going to get into that. So anyways, that is the difference between finishing powder and setting powder. I don't think it's that important to get too hung up on. But if you've seen those labels and you're wondering the difference, that is what the difference is supposed to be. But please also acknowledge the fact that there are hybrid products that do both. And this also applies to sprays. So just because you pick up a makeup spray does not mean it's a setting spray. Max Fix Plus, I think, is the world's best example. Everybody thinks it's a setting spray. You go to any matte counter and they'll tell you it's not actually intended to be a setting spray. It's a finishing spray. 5 years ago, probably, setting sprays were not nearly as popular as they are now. Scandinavia was about the only one out there. They're still the most popular. If you don't know, Urban Decay's setting powder is made by, or setting powder, Urban Decay's setting sprays are made by Scandinavia. It says it on the side of the bottle if you read the side of the bottle. Mary Kay came out with a setting spray back when I was in the Mary Kay world a little bit, and they got their product through Scandinavia as well. So that is definitely like the OG of setting sprays. You can get them at the drugstore now, you guys. Milani here has, I have 2 of them. They have the Make It Last setting spray that they came out with first. This is a great one. What's even better is they then came out with a Make It Dewy setting spray. So this is obviously a hybrid product. It's going to, it says 3-in-1, hydrates, illuminates, and sets. So this is definitely a hybrid. I think they came out with a matte one too, but I don't have that one. So it's across the board between powders and sprays. Loose powders, pressed powders, and sprays all have their categories. And that's everything you should need to know, I think. If I missed something or I confused something for you, please leave a comment below, and I will see you guys later.